When a person rebuilds their life in public, every move becomes a headline. When they do it from a wheelchair, every second carries weight. The rooftop restaurant below the skyline glowed like a small constellation. Tablecloths catching candlelight, silverware gleaming under chandeliers that didn't quite know when to quit. You could smell rosemary and champagne between snippets of soft violin. And in the middle of all that poise sat Avery Sinclair, 42, Chief Executive Officer of Maison Sinclair, one of the most recognized brands on the West Coast, who also happened to arrive in a wheelchair. To everyone else it might have looked effortless. Ivory blazer, silk blouse, posture straight, expression composed. Inside, her pulse rattled against her ribs. She hated that blind dates made her nervous, hated that normal was her assistant's idea of a cure. "You should try meeting someone outside of the boardroom," her assistant had said. "Let life surprise you." Avery almost laughed at that. Surprises weren't her thing. The hostess's smile had been perfectly trained, but her eyes, just for a blink, landed on the wheels. Avery caught it, the same polite discomfort she'd cataloged through endless networking events. It didn't sting anymore, not like it used to. It just reminded her she would always arrive with punctuation. He was 13 minutes late. She'd checked her watch 3 times, pretended to study the menu, memorized its specials out of sheer survival. Then came the rhythmic footsteps, a man escorted in by the maitre d', confident as a commercial, phone still in hand. Sharply tailored, perfect hair. Matthew Carrington. He stopped short like someone had replaced his birthday gift with a bill. "You're Avery?" His brows jumped, that tiny crack of disbelief widening fast. "Yes." She smiled, extending her hand. "You must be Matthew." He didn't take it. "Wow," he muttered, forcing a laugh. "This is unexpected." Avery kept her smile. "It's dinner, not a press conference." He shook his head, almost amused. "I thought I was meeting the CEO of Maison Sinclair." "Not." His gesture toward her chair was clumsy. "This situation." The sound around them shrank. Forks hovered midair. Nearby diners pretended to be deaf. "I am the CEO," she said. He scoffed. "Right. But come on, it feels like false advertising. Some kind of charity gimmick." For a second she felt 17 again, sitting in the wreckage of the car that changed everything. She reached smoothly for her clutch. Retreat was often the most dignified exit. Then another voice near her shoulder said, "Sorry I'm late, babe." She turned. New man, jeans, rolled-up navy shirt, boots dusted with work. No reservation, no hesitation. He laid a gentle hand on the back of her chair. Traffic was a nightmare. "You order yet?" She blinked. He bent closer, whispering, "Play along if you want out." Avery hesitated only a heartbeat before giving a small nod. He faced Matthew, his tone light but all steel underneath. "Thanks for keeping my fiancé company." He slipped the chair handles into his palms like he'd always had permission. "I'll take it from here." Matthew stared, mouth partially open. What is this?" "Date night rescue," the stranger said. "Come on, babe, not our crowd." The absurdity deflated Matthew's performative confidence. By the time Avery's chair rolled toward the elevator, the restaurant's whispers rose in their wake. In the mirrored lift, silence filled the narrow space between them. City lights streaked gold across her reflection. She looked up. "You didn't even blink," he shrugged easily. "Looked like you needed rescuing. Didn't think twice. You don't even know me." "Didn't need to." He smiled, small and completely unforced. She studied him, the calluses on his fingers, the steady half-grin of a man unbothered by status. "What's your name?" "Ethan Reed." The syllables settled calmly between them. "Well, Ethan Reed," she said at last, "I owe you dinner." He grinned. "Good, because I was about to grab food from a truck down the block. Not exactly 5-star, but the view's honest." Her brow arched. "Bit of a step down from truffle risotto." "Maybe," he said, "but the company sounds better." And for the first time that evening, Avery's smile shifted from practiced to real. They sat beside a curb under a string of flickering bulbs. The air smelled of grilled onions and late summer asphalt. Their drinks sweated in mismatched plastic cups. Streetlight gleam caught the gold in her hair, turning it into molten silk. She unwrapped the sandwich he'd ordered, small skepticism bright in her eyes. "You trust the chef of a truck parked under a billboard?" "Used to be a sous chef at the Garnier," Ethan said, taking a bite. "Swears by his garlic aioli." "You don't argue with clarity like that." She laughed quietly, forgetting for a moment who was watching, or that no one was. After a stretch of comfortable silence, she looked up. "You didn't know me," she said. "Back there. And still you just stepped in." He wiped his fingers with a napkin, thoughtful. "Didn't feel like stepping in." Felt like refusing to sit back and be one more person pretending not to see. Something in her chest softened. His manner carried no pity, no heroism, just decency. She reached for her cup. The paper slipped and tipped, soda spilling across her cream skirt. Instantly, her hands froze. Reflex couldn't save her, not since the accident. Panic surged, hot and familiar. But Ethan had already crouched beside her, unfolding a rag from his back pocket, the kind worn smooth by countless uses. "Hold still," he said simply. No comments, no awkwardness. He blotted the trail of liquid, lifted her foot in both hands, wiping the dark spots from her heel and shoe. His touch was firm but careful, focused only on fixing the problem. When he set her foot back on the rest, he looked up. Direct, steady. There, crisis averted. She stared at him, unable to speak. No pity, no hesitation, just an easy humanity that felt almost impossible these days. Ethan went back to his seat and grinned. "You really gonna waste that aioli now?" Her laugh broke free, small and trembling at first, then lighter. She picked up her sandwich again, shoulders easing, breathing steady. For the first time since the crash, the world didn't feel divided between who she used to be and what she'd become. Under the hum of traffic and cheap fluorescent light, Avery Sinclair, CEO, survivor, woman learning how to start again, ate a street corner sandwich beside a stranger and realized she no longer felt fragile. She just felt seen. Avery didn't sleep that night. She sat by the wide window of her penthouse, the city below, a haze of headlights and distant horns. Her legs lay motionless beneath a cashmere blanket. A half-finished glass of wine rested on the table, untouched. But what kept her awake wasn't pain. It was his eyes. Ethan's eyes, steady, calm, not probing, not pitying. He hadn't looked at her like she was broken or tragic or admirable for surviving. He just looked and saw her. That was what unmet her. She wheeled quietly into her bedroom, past rows of untouched designer gowns, past the mirror she had draped with silk months ago. She hadn't looked into it since the accident. Back then, she'd been returning from Milan Fashion Week. Maison Sinclair had just launched its most daring collection. Champagne flowed, cameras flashed, the world bowed, then metal, screams, a twisting spine. The word incomplete and silence. Her boyfriend left within weeks. "We're too young for this," he'd said. Partners pulled out, rumors started. She'll never wear her brand again. They were right. Since then, Avery had stayed in control, commanding, immaculate. But she hadn't worn a single piece of her own design, because they were made for women who walked, and she no longer knew who she was walking for. Across town, Ethan leaned against the wall of his workshop, brushing sawdust from his shirt. The scent of cedar and orange oil lingered in the air. His best friend, Marco, nursed a chipped mug of coffee nearby. "So let me get this straight," Marco said. "You fake a relationship in front of a five-star restaurant crowd?" Ethan chuckled. "Not exactly fake, just improvised. She looked like she had it handled." "No," Ethan said. "She looked like she had no choice but to handle it." He picked at a splinter in his thumb. "I didn't plan it, man. I saw that guy talking down to her loud enough for the room to hear. She didn't flinch, but something in her eyes." Marco tilted his head. "What did you see?" Ethan hesitated. "Someone who's tired of holding herself together." A pause settled between them. Marco asked, "She rich?" Ethan smirked. "Maison Sinclair rich." "The fashion house." "Yeah, she's the name on the label." Marco let out a low whistle. "So what's she doing eating grilled sandwiches on the sidewalk with you?" Ethan thought of her smile that night, surprised, hesitant, real. She didn't want to be seen. He said she wanted Toby understood, and somehow he had. "I'm not trying to save her," he added. "She doesn't need saving, but I couldn't watch someone treat her like she was less." Marco watched him. "You going to tell her about Julia?" Ethan's expression shifted. Years ago, he'd been studying architecture, full scholarship, top of his class. Then Julia, his little sister, got sick. Their mom was barely coping. His dad was gone, so he left school, took on odd jobs, learned to build with his hands, opened a small furniture shop, kept things simple, solid, real. "I chose this," he said, "not because I failed at something else, but because this matters. People touch what I make every day. They sit in it, live with it." He held up his hands, rough, scarred, honest. No pretense, no polish. Marco nodded. "And maybe that's exactly what someone like her needs." Ethan looked down at the floor, silent. Maybe. But what he couldn't shake, what kept echoing, was the moment her eyes met his as he wiped soda off her leg, lifted her. Foot gently back onto the footrest. No fear, no shame, no words, just trust. That night, for one fragile moment, she had let someone in, and he wasn't sure if he'd ever felt more seen either. The scent of wood and varnish greeted Avery as she entered the workshop, a far cry from the sterile world of fashion showrooms and glossy runways she usually lived in. Sunlight poured through wide windows, casting golden beams across stacks of cedar, pine, and walnut. Tools hung in perfect order on the walls. A half-finished rocking chair sat patiently in one corner. Ethan looked up from his workbench, wiping his hands on a rag permanently stained with sawdust and paint. "You came," he said, smiling. "You said you were building something," she replied, glancing around. "I was curious." He gestured toward a covered shape resting on a low platform. "I wanted to make something for you." Avery raised a brow. "Let me guess." "A chair," Ethan chuckled. "Close, but not quite." He walked over and pulled the cover off with a small flourish. Avery stared. It was a wheelchair, but nothing like Theon she used. The frame shimmered with smooth walnut blended seamlessly with matte carbon fiber. Sleek elegant. The curves were soft where her current one was rigid. The wheels were slim, sculpted with discreet treads. A soft leather cushion replaced the standard seat molded to the body without looking clinical. Her breath caught. "I noticed a few things," Ethan said gently. "The hand rims on yours. They slip, especially when you're not wearing gloves." She blinked, surprised. "And your back?" he continued, showing the adjustable panel. "You lean too far forward because your seat doesn't support you evenly. That strains your shoulders even if you don't say it." Avery swallowed and he knelt beside the chair. "The clearance. You told me you visit fabric warehouses. I measured the average height of cutting tables and adjusted this so you won't keep bumping the frames. You measured fabric tables." He stood, meeting her gaze. "You pay attention." No one had ever looked at her like this. Not just seen her, but noticed the small battles she fought daily, the ones she never mentioned. "And this," he added, turning the chair slightly. Behind the backrest, a small wooden panel clicked open to reveal a folding mirror. Etched into the circular edge were words carved into the wood. "Style is presence, and you define it." Her lips parted, but no sound came. "It figured," Ethan said quietly. "You might want to check your lipstick before a meeting. But more than that, I wanted you to remember what I see." She rolled closer. Her fingers brushed the polished wood. It wasn't cold like metal. It felt alive. Slowly, cautiously, she transferred into the seat. Ethan stayed nearby, but didn't hover. The moment she settled in, something shifted. She didn't feel restrained. She felt supported. Her arms rested naturally. When she rolled forward slightly, it was smooth, almost effortless. She turned a full circle and laughed, soft, startled. Ethan smiled at the sound. Then Avery looked into the mirror. Her reflection stared back, luminous, strong, her golden hair lit by sunlight from above. For the first time since the accident, she didn't feel like a woman in a wheelchair. She felt like herself. "You made this just from watching?" she asked softly. "I listened," Ethan said. "Not just with my ears." Avery looked at him for a long time. No designer at Maison Sinclair had ever created something that fit her like this, because no one had ever tried to understand her this way. She reached out, fingers brushing the carved words again. "Style is presence, and you define it," she smiled. Not for cameras, not for clients, not for the brand, but for herself. And for the man who had looked past what she'd lost, and seen everything she still was. The venue was all glass and glamour. A repurposed train station transformed into a high-fashion dreamscape for Maison Sinclair's seasonal collection debut. Chandeliers sparkled like stars. Models glided down a runway, awash in gold and ivory. Avery sat near the front row, poised and polished. Golden hair in loose waves. Her wheelchair gleamed beneath her, no longer hidden. It was part of her now. Beside her stood Ethan, freshly shaved, shirt crisp, shoes scuffed, but clean. He wore a navy jacket she had tailored for him with his name stitched inside the cuff just for him. He looked unsure, adjusting his collar. "You okay?" she asked. "Just wondering how I ended up in a room where the perfume costs more than my rent." She smiled. "You're here as my guest, my friend." He nodded, though his eyes still scanned the crowd like a man trying to shrink. As the show began, cameras clicked, pens scribbled. But by intermission, attention shifted. Whispers, flashes aimed at Avery, then at Ethan. Later that night, headlines bloomed across the internet. Powerhouse in a chair and the carpenter at her side, beauty, brains, and a blue-collar beau. Maison Sinclair CEO sparks romance rumors with mystery man in flannel. Some found it inspiring, others scandalous, but investors they found it risky. The stock dipped. Board members called, "Is this serious? Do we know his background? Will this affect the brand?" Avery ended each call without comment. When Ethan found out, he came to her office that evening, wiping his hands on a rag. "I think maybe I should step back," he said, not meeting her eyes. "The world you live in, it's not built for people like me." People like you, she asked sharply. I'm a woodworker, Avery. I don't wear suits. I don't speak in press releases. I don't belong in front rows. We're not dating, she said evenly. You came as my friend. I know, but they don't see it that way. Well, I do, she said, rolling closer. And I don't let headlines or shareholders decide who I stand next to. He looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. Just once. That weekend, Maison Sinclair's retrospective opened at the Modern Art Museum. Corseted silhouettes, deconstructed gowns, and the signature gold thread. Her legacy, Ethan stood quietly beside her. Then it happened. A man in a gray suit stepped forward, mic clipped to his collar. Cameraman behind him. Mr. Reed? The reporter asked too loud. Must be quite the ride. From carving shelves to courting CEOs, Ethan stiffened. I'm just here as a friend. The reporter smirked. Oh, come on. What's the trick? Pity. Perfect timing. Cameras clicked. Ethan started to answer but didn't have to. Avery wheeled herself forward, placing Herbity between Ethan and the lens. Her voice cut through the noise. He's the only person in this room who's never looked at me like a broken product. He doesn't see a brand or a chair. He sees me. The reporter blinked. And you? She added. You don't see anything past your own headline. Silence, then applause. Soft at first, then building. Ethan looked at her stunned. She didn't look away because she didn't need saving. She needed someone to stand beside her, especially when the world didn't understand why. And that didn't need Alabel. Not yet. The days that followed were quiet. Too quiet. Avery sat in her office, the corner suite of a glass building that once pulsed with her ambition. Her phone lay beside her sketch pad face up. Still no new messages. No Ethan. He hadn't come by the atelier in 4 days. Hadn't replied in 3. The last time they spoke, he'd promised to drop off a sample of the walnut inlay he thought would match her display shelving. She told him to bring it by any time. He never did. At first, she assumed he was busy. Things happened. But by day 5, her chest tightened every time the elevator dinged, and it wasn't him. By day 6, her sketches blurred into meaningless lines. She hadn't realized how much space he'd quietly filled. Small spaces in her day that now echoed. When he finally messaged, it was a single line. You deserve someone bigger than me. No punctuation, no explanation. Avery stared at it until the screen dimmed. Her fingers hovered, then dropped. What could she say? Her first instinct was fury. How dare he vanish without a word after everything she'd let him see? The raw parts, the fears, the quiet laughter no one else ever earned. But the anger faded quickly, too quickly. It left behind a familiar ache. She rolled herself toward the far wall, the one with the full-length mirror she hadn't uncovered in days. Her reflection looked back. Golden hair, sculpted cheekbones, a silk blouse with pearl buttons, flawless makeup. But the eyes were hers and not. They looked like the girl in the hospital bed days after the crash. The woman in the boardroom moments after her ex whispered, I didn't sign up for this. Now another voice joined them. You deserve someone bigger than me. She was too much again, too visible, too complicated, too scarred. Her gaze dropped to the wheelchair. Still the custom one Ethan built. The soft walnut frame, the smooth wheels, the tiny hidden mirror tucked in the back. She reached behind her, opened the panel, ran her thumb along the carved words. Fashion is a spirit, and you are the definition. The mirror caught her face. Not the CEO, not the brand, just her. Her voice barely a breath. Was I asking for too much? Across the city, Ethan sanded the same piece of walnut for the 3rd time. His hands were raw. He hadn't slept, hadn't eaten. When Avery's father had walked into the workshop, Ethan thought it was a joke. But Mr. Sinclair wasn't there to yell. He was calm, controlled, deadly in a way only powerful men could be. You seem like a good man, he said. But good men don't always belong in every story. Ethan clenched the edge of the table. If you care about her, step back. Don't make her choose between love and legacy. It wasn't a threat. It was a verdict. Maison Sinclair's board is watching. A scandal would cost her everything. And then the final blow. A carpenter can't protect what she's built. Ethan said nothing. He couldn't because deep down he knew. Every boardroom whisper, every tabloid headline, they would use him to hurt her. So he left. He walked out of her world to keep her in it. When he typed that message, he wanted her to fight back. To say he was wrong, but she didn't. And maybe that was her mercy because silence, even painful, was kinder than hearing her agree. He kept sanding, but every stroke sounded like her name. Rain spilled from the night sky like the city had been holding its breath all day. The streets glistened, reflecting fractured colors from passing headlights and flickering storefront signs. Wind tugged at the awning of a shuttered cafe. Puddles formed in the uneven pavement, and the occasional Carcent water sprang across curbs. Avery wheeled herself along the sidewalk near the industrial quarter. not intentionally toward Ethan's workshop, but her hands had a memory of their own. She told herself she was only out for air, but deep down she knew where her heart was leading her. The rain soaked through her trench coat, plastering her golden hair to her neck and cheeks. Her fingers were slick, struggling for grip on the wheels. Every push took more effort. A block ahead, a street lamp flickered and buzzed. She crossed toward it, breath short, wheels cutting through puddles. Then the sound, tires screeching, a low engine growl. She turned her head just in time to see a delivery truck skidding around the corner too fast. The driver trying to correct. Avery's right wheel caught in a crack between sidewalk tiles. She pushed. It didn't move. The headlights loomed closer. She didn't scream, just braced her arms and closed her eyes. Then a blur, a shout, hands in motion. She was pulled backward, the chair lurching free just as the truck roared past, horn blaring, tires missing her by inches. She hit the wet pavement hard. Cold water splashed up her back. The world spun, and when it slowed, he was there. Ethan, dripping wet, kneeling beside her, chest heaving, one arm still around her like he was afraid she'd vanish. Neither spoke. Rain fell in sheets. Around them, the city kept moving, headlights passing, neon signs blinking. But in the silence between their breaths, something ancient stirred. Avery's eyes filled, her hands trembled. Her voice was barely a whisper. "You lied to me." Ethan didn't deny it. Water dripped from his jaw. His voice came low, rough. "I thought leaving would protect you." She looked at him, soaked and shivering, face open, vulnerable. "You think I needed protecting? I needed honesty. I needed you." He closed his eyes, guilt rippling through his features. "Your father said I'd ruin you." Avery shook her head slowly, tears mixing with rain. "I'd rather be broken by the truth than happy in a lie." His breath caught. He looked at her like he was seeing her for the first time. Not as the CEO, not as a woman in a wheelchair, but as Avery, just Avery. A storm-torn girl in the middle of a street who still dared to ask for truth. "I can't lose you again," he said hoarsely. It nearly broke me. She didn't say anything. Instead, she reached out. Her palm brushed his cheek, rough with stubble and rain, and lingered there, soft and trembling. Then she leaned in and kissed him. No hesitation, no speech. It wasn't poetic. Their lips met clumsily, wet and shaking. Her fingers tightened in his shirt. His hand found her waist, anchoring them both in a world that had stopped spinning just long enough for this. It wasn't a kiss that asked questions. It was a kiss that answered them. It told the story of two people who had almost lost each other to pride, to fear, to circumstance, and had found their way back anyway. The rain didn't let up. Neither did they. When they pulled apart, her forehead rested against his, their breath mingling in the cold. She whispered, "No more hiding." His voice cracked. "Never again." They sat like that a moment longer, soaked to the bone, hearts beating too loud for the night to ignore. And somewhere beyond the storm, the city held its breath again, not in fear, but in reverence. Because sometimes the quietest love stories begin not in perfect timing, but in the mess, the danger, the rain, and the truth. The scent of sawdust and jasmine drifted through the air, warm and grounding. Light spilled from hanging bulbs across the ceiling of Ethan's workshop, casting a golden haze over rows of handmade wooden benches and tables. Everything had been built by hand. The chairs were mismatched but lovingly sanded. The aisle wasn't lined with roses, but with fabric flowers Avery had collected from old Maison Sinclair samples, stitched by a seamstress, who only smiled and said, "For good luck." There were no cameras. No sponsorships, just warmth, wood, and people who had stayed when others walked away. Avery rolled slowly down the short aisle, the rubber of her wheels gliding easily over the polished floor. She wasn't wearing white, no veil, no heels, just a sleek ivory jumpsuit, structured but soft, stitched with a faint thread of gold along the seams like quiet firelight. She didn't try to be anything today. She just was. Ethan stood at the front in a soft linen shirt, sleeves rolled, suspenders slightly off-center, hair still damp from the rain. He had spent the morning polishing the floor, not for show, but so she would glide effortlessly. She didn't know yet. They hadn't called it a wedding. On the invitation, handwritten by Avery, it simply said, "A beginning." When she reached him, Ethan took her hand. No grand gesture, just steady, certain like always. There were no vows, no altar. Instead, Avery turned to the small crowd. Seamstresses, woodworkers, childhood friends, the kind who showed up when life was falling apart. Her voice was calm. "I used to think being seen meant being everywhere. Spotlight's power covers." She paused, looked at Ethan. "But being seen isn't about noise. It's about presence." Her voice trembled just slightly. Ethan Reed didn't try to fix me or make me smaller, quieter, easier to accept. He didn't see the chair. He didn't see the brand. He saw me when I was most afraid. And still, Hestade. She reached into the pouch of her chair and pulled out the mirror Ethan had built into her first custom wheelchair. The same mirror. The same inscription still faintly etched on the edge. Fashion is attitude, and you are the definition. A small smile tugged at Ethan's lips. Then a creak, everyone turned. Avery's father stood at the back, long wool coat, a box in hand. He said nothing, just walked forward, silent, steady, and placed the box in her lap. Avery blinked, startled. She opened it. Inside an old photo, a little girl with golden curls beside her mother at a sewing machine. Sunlight draping the scene in gold. The frame, hand-carved walnut, finished by hand. Avery's breath caught. She looked up, but he was already gone, melting back into the crowd, eyes unreadable. She said nothing, but didn't need to. As dusk settled and guests drifted out with paper cups of cider and homemade shortbread, Avery and Ethan stood together near the open door, still holding hands. No fanfare, no confetti. Just two people wheeling and walking side by side onto the small gravel path behind the shop, scattered with fallen petals strung with soft amber lights. The world didn't cheer. It didn't need to. Because in the hush of evening, beneath a canopy of warm lights, and with fingers gently interlocked, Avery Sinclair and Ethan Reed weren't chasing attention. They had found something far greater. A life not built on spectacle, but truth and the quiet, enduring courage to begin again, fully seen. Thank you for joining Avery and Ethan's journey. A story about being seen, not for perfection, but for truth. If you've ever felt overlooked or not enough, know this. Your worth isn't in what you achieve, but in who you are. If their story moved you, hit the hype button and subscribe to Soul-Stirring Stories, where love speaks softly, but stays loud in the heart. Until next time, stay brave, stay soft, and trust that love will find you just as you are.